Okay, this video is to explain some of the things that I think don't make sense in Meshfusion. I think the concept and idea is beautiful, but practically it has a ways to go for it to be, I think, as useful as it could be. So what I mean is, this is just three cubes, three cubic cubes, and so I'll just make yet another Meshfusion item here. I'll turn these guys back on. Okay, so if I pick the first one and the second one, schematic fusion, zoom out a bit, new fusion. I think the first thing, this video is really for the developers more than anything else, but this more options thing, this shouldn't be called more options in my opinion. Like it shouldn't be a menu it should just be, or if it is, it should just be down or open. This should be spun down by default, because once upon a time this setting screwed me up for about a week before a friend and I figured out what the problem was. Basically, this value was set way out of scale to my model, or my model was way out of scale to this setting, and the strips were basically swallowing up the model. Super frustrating, but eventually we figured it out. So I would think that this would be something you would present to users right off the bat. So that's my first comment. Second thing, so once I run this Meshfusion, okay, hide cut A. Let me also hide the original. Okay. Well, in general, I'm on an iMac that's a few years old, but I don't know. I don't know why this happens, but I think the mesh visibility stuff it's a little hokey as far as how often it works, especially if I'm in the model viewport and I'm in the Fusion tab. I click the Fusion set. See, I've got grids showing up and disappearing and stuff like that. Like, I have to click this twice for that to happen the first time to get it to work. Just stuff like that just seems a little bit not worked out. So if that could be worked out, that'd be tremendous. The second thing is the strips, and that you can change them. That's really awesome. I think maybe one day, if there was some way to define what's called a variable radius, like in a CAD program. Again, I'm an industrial designer. I come from using a lot of Rhino, SolidWorks, but really Rhino in recent history, where you can just add different values along this curve. Right? I assume that this is some sort of curve item, so that you can have what's called a variable radius in other programs. That'd be really cool. So there's that. I think the other thing is that if you go into like top view, you can see this curve is really wonky in space. Like it's not touching the mesh, and also the mesh is doing something exceptionally strange as it turns this curve. Not that it's faceted, but just that the shape is, I don't think, quite accurate. So if things like that could be tuned up, that'd be awesome. The other thing is, let's see, if I add this, oh right, if I add this mesh, I have to hit, what is it, Control F. That's just not obvious, and there's no, as far as I know, there's no menu anywhere. Like you literally need to know, oh, that the way to add stuff or do anything is to hit Control F. To me, that is not intuitive at all. What would be intuitive is all these 8 things being in a, oops, undo that, is those things being in a right-click menu, because it just makes more sense. It's like, I mean, at least you have a mouse, therefore you have right-click, but you don't, there's no, by definition, you don't know to hit Control F unless you've watched a video. So just from a usability standpoint, I think that would make a lot more sense, personally. Anyways, prep and select add meshes, connect this guy up here, and what I'll talk about first is what happened here. I don't know what happened right there. Let me hide this mesh. It's out of the way. But it's a pile of poop, basically. Like, this is not usable. This is definitely not what happened in any other type of package where you can do Boolean types of operations. Also, I think every time you add a mesh or a set of meshes to the Fusion, by default, it should be like, I add meshes and update strips happens, just because they're never updated. So why it just seems counterintuitive that I have to go up here pretty much every time to update the strips so that I can then change the width of this. Which brings me to my next question, which is, nothing about this makes any sense, because it doesn't tell me what loop A or loop B is. So I'm kind of randomly guessing at what loop A and loop B are. So if there's some way to highlight them or something like that, or or if as I'm rolling over these, they're highlighting differently over here, but it just isn't obvious and it doesn't make sense that that's A versus B, and that I'm then supposed to click channel hall as the next step to change this. Like I had to literally guess at that for another few days, like because these seem like separate operations, but in reality, they're connected operations, I think. So, and then it's also that even when I do that, it's now I'm scaling the width versus actually inputting the width like I was before as like a millimeter value. Like that doesn't make a ton of sense either. And it's also not changing. So it's things like that about Meshfusion that kind of drive me a bit bonkers. But bigger than that is that when one strip, this one, crosses another one, this one, you get a pile of poop as the corner, like this. Even if these values were, one was thoughtfully larger than the other so that it could evenly or nicely run around here, it's like it just makes this just terrible looking mesh. And I get that it's a concepting tool, but it just seems completely. What's frustrating is that it seems completely possible that this would make sense, yet it just does some random thing. So I would encourage you guys maybe to look at any other kind of package that does filleting and just how people solve filleting challenges. Like SolidWorks has some tools, and again, I'm not even a SolidWorks fan, but it does have tools to help you try to figure this stuff out so that you're like, oh, well, this one should be smaller than this one so that this fillet can run around it and not create pinches and things like this. Also, the DeMonte group has a lot of really interesting stuff about filleting, particularly in SolidWorks. That's DIMONTE group.com. It's a group based out of Chicago. Anyways, I mean, I love that it exists. I love that it's native inside of Modo, but it just leaves a lot to be desired for most things, or anything that's going to intersect this major volume more than once where the strips cross. It's just not functional. And so I hope that it gets updated and you guys keep rocking. But that's all my feedback. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.